The blood was still fresh, drying slow in the red dust, sticky beneath the sun. Naiche Santiago crouched beside the overturned stagecoach, her fingers brushing a smear of it near the shattered wheel. The heat hadn't burned it away, yet this had happened less than an hour ago. Buzzards circled overhead, lazy and low. The wagon was splintered where it had slammed into a rocky outcrop, one wheel cracked through the spokes. Leather reins lay tangled and cut. The driver was dead and his throat-slit eyes wide open, staring at nothing. But it wasn't the blood or the corpse that stopped Naiche cold. It was the footprints. Deep impressions heading northeast, just beyond the drag marks. Someone had run. Not been taken, not dragged, not carried. Run. She stood slowly, eyes narrowing under the brim of her hat, the wind lifting her dark braid off her neck. The scent of gunpowder lingered. 2 sets of boot prints told the story of captives hauled off by force. One set of smaller prints barefoot showed hesitation, then a sudden change of pace. That person had bolted. Hard. A survivor. Naiche exhaled through her nose and turned toward the horizon. Sierra Blanca loomed far off, jagged and pale under the blazing sky. If the runners had any sense, they'd head for cover in the canyons. If not, they'd die out here by sundown. A faint sound caught her attention, a horse galloping hard. She dropped a hand to the knife on her belt, body coiled tight. The rider came fast out of the south dust, trailing behind like smoke. Black stallion, strong legs, lathered flanks. The man rode like he was part of the animal, not astride it. Tall, lean face shadowed by a hat pulled low. He pulled the horse up hard when he saw her dismounted before the dust had time to settle. "You Naiche Santiago." His voice was raw, scraped, like it had been used too much in too little time. She didn't answer right away, just looked at him. Hispanic, maybe mid-20s, stubble shadowing his jaw, shirt dusted with travel, eyes dark and wild with worry. Not a man out for a ride, a man out of time. "I am," she said at last. "I'm Tomas Delgado. I work the Rios Ranch east of El Corazon. My boss was on that stagecoach. So was his daughter." She looked back at the wreckage. "I found 2 sets of drag marks, and 1 runner." He took off his hat, ran a trembling hand through his sweat-matted hair. "Her name's Isabella. She's 20. They were coming back from Las Cruces. The sheriff said if there was one person in this territory who could track anything, it was you." Naiche studied him. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle twitch. Fear lived behind his eyes, but not panic. Determination. Regret. "You care for her," she said. He looked up, startled, then nodded once. "Yes, more than I've ever said out loud." "You're late," she said plainly. "If you'd been here when the stage rolled in, one of the colts threw a shoe. I lost an hour." His voice cracked. "If I'd been there, maybe I could have stopped it." "Or been shot and left beside the driver," she said, turning away. Blaming yourself doesn't help her. Tomas was quiet for a beat. When he spoke again, it was soft. "Please, name what you want. I'll pay it. Just help me bring her home." Naiche looked toward the tracks again. The runner's prints were light, staggered, someone injured, probably barefoot. They wouldn't get far alone. The other tracks, heavier, showed signs of 3 horses, all bearing double weight. "The prints are cooling by the minute," she said. "We move now, or we don't catch them at all." Relief hit his face like rain after drought. "Thank you. I've got water and ammo. Whatever we need, I'll carry it." "We don't have time for town," she said, whistling once sharp. From over the ridge, her mare appeared, a gray Mustang, with a thick mane and steady gait. Ash trotted up and nudged her side like they'd rehearsed it. Naiche swung into the saddle, pointed northeast. If they're smart, they'll try to lose us in the breaks. If not, we'll catch them before dark. Tomas mounted quickly, and the two rode out into the unforgiving land. They traveled for hours, the sun climbing, then sinking shadows stretching long. Naiche rode slightly ahead, her eyes scanning ground that looked like nothing to anyone else. But to her it was loud, with story rocks shifted wrong, a bush bent against the wind, a hoofprint half covered with dust. 3 horses, one favoring its front left leg. The riders had pushed them too hard. "They're slowing," she said over her shoulder. "We'll gain ground." Behind her, Tomas rode silent, his eyes on the land, but his thoughts elsewhere. At one point he said she was fearless even as a kid, climbed the tallest fence on the ranch, broke her arm doing it. Never cried. Naiche said nothing. "She went off to school in Las Cruces," he added after a moment. "Her father wanted her to become a lady, but I don't think that's what she ever wanted." Naiche finally glanced back. "And you, I just wanted her to come home." They said little else as the wind picked up, whispering across the hills like old voices. Dusk crept closer. The temperature dropped. Then Naiche stopped, suddenly dismounted. She knelt, fingers brushing a patch of churned dirt. "Here." Tomas dismounted too, looking confused. "What is it?" "They stopped here. Fresh droppings." One rider circled, watching. The girl tried to run. There was a struggle. She fought, his fists clenched. "Is she hurt? She's alive?" "And fighting." "That's good." The wind shifted. Coyotes yipped in the distance. Naiche rose, brushing her hands on her trousers. "We've got less than an hour of light left. We can push hard, maybe catch them, but the terrain's rough. And if we break a leg out here, we're done." Tomas looked torn in two. "I can't let her spend another night with those bastards. You can't help her if your horse breaks its neck in the dark." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "We camp. At first light we ride." Naiche led them toward a narrow canyon where scrub oaks leaned into the rock and the wind died down. They built a small fire in silence. Tomas cleaned his rifle. Naiche scanned the horizon, thinking about the girl who had run barefoot and bleeding through brush and stone. "She's smart," she said. "And brave." Tomas nodded. "So are you." Naiche didn't answer. She sat by the fire, listening to the flames crackle and the night settle in. Somewhere out there, a young woman was waiting for dawn, and so were they. "Most folks think the desert's empty, but I see its memory in every bent blade of grass." The fire had burned down to glowing embers. A breeze rolled through the narrow canyon, stirring ash and brush alike. Naiche Santiago sat cross-legged beside her mare, sharpening her knife in slow, even strokes. The rhythm calmed her more than the heat of the flames ever could. Tomas Delgado was asleep near the fire, his hat tilted forward over his face. But Naiche could tell by the tightness in his jaw he wasn't resting easy. Grief did that, settled under the skin like grit that wouldn't wash off. She looked to the sky. Stars blanketed the blackness, sharp and cold, and Sierra Blanca stood like a ghost on the horizon. Somewhere out there, Isabella was either alive or dead, and every second that passed without knowing was a weight pressing down harder. Just before dawn, she stood and stirred the coals with a stick, then nudged Tomas awake with the toe of her boot. Time to move. He sat up fast, reaching for his rifle. "What time is it light enough?" She was already packing her gear, movements practiced and spare. "We've got maybe an hour on them." They broke camp quickly. Naiche mounted Ash, her gaze already sweeping the canyon wall and the trail beyond. She let the mare walk, eyes scanning ground that seemed to anyone else like nothing but sandstone and scattered brush. To her, it spoke in tongues. Here, the broken shape of a hoofprint splayed wide, indicating fatigue. There, a branch scraped raw on one side, and further on, a line of stones with one slightly out of place shifted by a rider's weight. They came through here maybe 2 hours ago, she said, without looking back. Tomas rode beside her, his stallion picking its way carefully over the rough terrain. You see all that from one bush and a rock, it's not one thing. It's all of it. She pointed with her chin. See how the gravel's darker there, that's fresh. They moved over it before dew could settle, and that creosote's leaves still turned like something brushed them recently. He fell quiet watching her work. The canyon began to narrow walls, closing in like arms folded tight. They passed through a split in the rock barely wide enough for their horses. On the other side, the landscape opened again into scrub plain dotted with pinon and rabbit brush. You ever scared? He asked out of nowhere. Naiche didn't answer for a long time. Then not of men. Not often. I'm more afraid of failing someone who counted on me. He looked at her like he wanted to say something more, but didn't. They rode on. Around mid-morning, they came across a scattering of torn fabric caught on a thorn bush. Naiche slid from her saddle and examined it. Fine cotton, pale blue. A drop of dried blood marked one edge. She fought again, she murmured. Tomas cursed under his breath, fists tightening. They're hurting her. She's still fighting. Naiche tucked the fabric into her saddlebag. That means she's alive. Just past a rocky outcrop, Naiche dismounted again, walking carefully, now crouching low to inspect the path. 3 horses, she said. Same as before. The one with the limp is worse. See this. She pointed to a set of prints where the hoof had dragged slightly. They're losing time. We're gaining. Tomas crouched beside her, squinting. Looks like dirt to me. Then you're lucky I'm here, she said. Rising. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. You always this direct, don't have time for soft words when someone's bleeding out in the brush. They pressed on the sun, climbing overhead. Heat shimmered off the rocks in waves. By midday, they reached a dry wash that cut deep through the land. Naiche paused. They crossed here, she said. Probably trying to throw us off. Tomas looked down the wash. No prints, no visible prints. She pointed downstream. See the silt against that root, still wet. Something big came through not long ago. That much weight moving fast water doesn't settle right after. They crossed, moving slow through the uneven footing. On the far side, Naiche found a piece of apple bitten half-eaten tossed aside. She picked it up, turned it over in her hand. This is hers. You know that Naiche nodded. She's the only one who'd eat. The men aren't thinking about food, and it's fresh. Hope flickered behind Tomas's tired eyes. Then we're close. Closer than they'd like. They continued along the edge of the hills. As they rode, Tomas spoke again, his voice quieter now, like he didn't want to disturb the land around them. I met Isabella when I was 16. Her father took me in when I had nothing. I mucked stalls, fixed fences. She'd follow me around, asking why horses moved the way they did, why some got angry when you touched their ears. Naiche listened without comment. She's stubborn, he added. Used to sneak out of the house at night to ride bareback. Her father would rage, but she never stopped. Said the stars looked different from horseback. Naiche almost smiled. She sounds like someone who knows her own mind. She is. That's what scares me most. That she's somewhere right now, and they're trying to break that out of her. She hasn't broken, Naiche said. She left us a trail. The sun dipped lower as they reached a hill overlooking a small basin. Naiche raised a hand, stopping them both. Her eyes narrowed. Smoke. Thin, rising straight up, not much wind. Tomas followed her gaze. Could be them. Could be someone else. But it's a bad place to stop if they're trying to hide. They're tired. Nietzsche dismounted and dropped to her belly, crawling forward through the brush until she could see better. A small fire crackled near a cluster of rocks. 3 horses were tethered in the shade. 2 younger men, scruffy-armed, moved around the camp. One older man sat beside a girl with a torn dress and bruised face. Isabella. Nietzsche slid backward and returned to Tomas. It's them. Then let's go, he said, rising in his stirrups. She grabbed his bridle. Not yet. They have her, and if we rush in, they'll use her as cover, maybe kill her to make a point. Her voice was low, firm. We wait. Watch. 2 of them look ready to ride out scouting or fetching water, maybe. When they do, it's just the leader left. Tomas breathed hard through his nose, but nodded. Nietzsche turned toward the ridge eyes, never leaving the camp. Patience is how we win this. They watched as the 2 bandits saddled up and rode out. Only the leader remained, now pacing near Isabella, who stared straight ahead, unmoving. Tomas's hands trembled on the reins. Now Nietzsche said, "We flank him. You go south. I'll take the north." He looked at her. Together, she confirmed. Not like some dime novel hero. We do this right. He nodded once. Then they split 2 shadows on the edge of rescue hearts, pounding dust rising in their wake. The vultures don't lie either. Where they circle, something bad waits beneath. The sun had climbed higher, bleaching the sky into a harsh, blinding white as Nietzsche Santiago crawled belly down across the ridge. Dust coated her lips, but she didn't dare lick them. Below the camp lay nestled against a cluster of wind-carved rocks, just far enough from the main trail to stay hidden unless you knew what to look for. She had known. The smoke was a thread, the kind the desert wove between death and silence. And then there were the vultures. They circled slowly overhead, patient and cruel, waiting for something to give out. Nietzsche had seen them follow dying deer-fevered cattle, even a lost miner once. They always knew. She flattened herself behind a large boulder and studied the clearing. 3 men had been there earlier. Now only one remained, the older one with a long coat and a rifle across his lap. He sat near the girl, Isabella Rios, who was curled on her side arms, bound at the wrists. Her dress was torn across the shoulder. Her dark hair hung in a matted curtain. But she was alive. And she was watching. Watching him. Watching everything, good Nietzsche thought. She's still thinking. She slid back from the ridge and returned to where Tomas Delgado crouched with his rifle. His jaw was tight, but he didn't speak until she gave the signal. He's alone, she whispered. The other 2 rode out, probably to scout or fetch water. Tomas nodded. She okay? Looks it, bruised, tired, but she's watching, waiting. I can take him. No, Nietzsche said, hand firm on his arm. We do this right. He's armed. We split, come in from both sides. I'll move first. When you see him look north, you move south. Wait for my shot. Tomas didn't argue. That was something she was starting to notice. He listened, really listened. That mattered more than most men realized. They parted without another word. Nietzsche moved like shadow, winding around the rocks, staying low to the ground. Every movement was precise, learned from years tracking deer bandits' wild mustangs. Her breath was slow, her rifle steady. She got within 30 yards of the camp, tucked between 2 stones. The bandit was talking now. She couldn't hear all the words, but his tone was mocking, cruel. Isabella flinched as he stepped closer, crouching near her, with a smirk on his weathered face. Nietzsche's fingers curled tighter around her rifle. Her heart pounded, but her hand was still. She'd made difficult shots before. but never one this close to another human life. Then he grabbed Isabella by the arm and yanked her to her feet. "Company," he shouted, suddenly eyes locking on something behind Nietzsche's position. Her gut flipped. Tomas. Damn it. The man hauled Isabella in front of him, spinning and dragging her like a shield. He pressed the muzzle of his pistol to her temple. "I know you're out there," he yelled. "Show yourself or the girl dies," Nietzsche swore under her breath. She shifted just enough to see across the camp. Tomas had stepped into the open rifle, aimed face hard. "Let her go," he shouted. "This doesn't have to end this way." The bandit laughed. "You're outnumbered and outgunned." "You're alone," Tomas replied. "And you're out of time." The man barked a laugh, shaking Isabella roughly. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just stared at Tomas with something like fury and trust woven together. Nietzsche took her chance. The bandit had angled slightly, his right shoulder forward, gun hand up, attention locked on Tomas. She exhaled, centered the front sight, felt the stillness inside her, the quiet that only ever came when it mattered most. One breath in, half out. Then she squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked like thunder through the canyon. The bandit's head jerked back, body crumpling to the side. His pistol fired once into the air as he fell. Isabella stumbled forward, dazed. Tomas sprinted in, catching her before she collapsed. His arms wrapped around her, lifting her like she weighed nothing. Nietzsche stood, rifle still hot in her hands, and moved quickly into the clearing. She kept her sights trained on the bandit's body until she was sure. Dead. One shot. Clean. Tomas was on his knees, holding Isabella, whispering something Nietzsche didn't catch. The girl's eyes were closed, but her chest moved in ragged breaths. Her face was scratched, but her spirit looked unbroken. Nietzsche turned to Don Rafael, who lay nearby, bound and unmoving. She knelt, checking his pulse. Weak, but there. She pulled water from her canteen, dampened a cloth from her bag, and cleaned the blood caked to his temple. The wound was jagged, looked like a pistol whip, maybe a fall. Nothing was broken, but he'd need a doctor. Behind her, Tomas spoke, voice rough. "I thought we were too late." "You weren't," Nietzsche said. "She's here, and she's strong." He looked up at her, then eyes rimmed red but steady. "You made that shot like it was nothing. It wasn't." She stood and moved to untie the horses. Two of them were healthy enough to ride. The third, the one with the limp, was swaying with exhaustion. "Can he ride?" Tomas asked, motioning to Don Rafael. "Barely, but we'll manage. Isabella can double with you." Nietzsche found her saddle and began securing gear. The adrenaline was fading, and with it came the familiar ache in her shoulders, the tightness behind her eyes. She ignored it. Isabella stirred, reaching for Tomas's arm. Who is she?" Tomas smiled gently. "Nietzsche Santiago, the best tracker in New Mexico." Nietzsche didn't respond. She was busy checking the bandits' saddlebags. Supplies, stolen jewelry, 2 silver coins, engraved with the name of a ranch near Socorro. That could come in useful later. She tossed what they needed into her own packs and burned the rest. Let the buzzards feast on what was left. As they prepared to leave, a soft wind stirred through the canyon, and Nietzsche looked up toward the ridge. The vultures were still circling, not waiting for the dead, watching the living. She mounted Ash and waited as Tomas helped Isabella onto his stallion. He climbed up behind her, careful, protective. The girl leaned against him, eyes closed. They rode out slow, winding back through the trail they'd come, every hoofbeat muffled in the dust. By the time the sky shifted pink and gold, the town of Lincoln shimmered in the distance like a mirage. Tomas shifted in his saddle. "What do I owe you?" Nietzsche didn't look back. "You already paid." He was quiet after that. When they arrived at the doctor's, townsfolk spilled out of doorways, gasping at the sight. The sheriff took the bandit's name, Emmett Cross, wanted in 3 states. There'd be reward money. Naiche gave her statement, brief and clear. Then she left. Not to the saloon, not to the inn. She went home, a cabin west of town, quiet, simple. No one followed, not even Tomas. But as she sat on her porch that night, oil lamp flickering beside her, she thought about the way he'd looked at her in that canyon. Not with awe, not with fear, with respect and something else. She pushed the thought away and looked up at the stars. The desert never forgot. It remembered everything. So did she. He used her as a shield. So I made the only shot I've ever prayed over. Naiche Santiago hadn't meant to stop moving. Her mare Ash nickered beneath her gently, as if asking why they were pausing. But Naiche sat still, the reins slack in her hand-eyes on the canyon beyond. The campfire smoke was gone now. The vultures had moved on. But her thoughts hadn't. She could still see him, the bandit leader, the gleam of his pistol. The way he'd yanked Isabella in front of him like she was nothing more than cloth and bone. Naiche had pulled the trigger not because it was a perfect shot, but because it was the only shot. And for the first time in years, she had whispered a prayer before firing. Not to God, not to spirits, to her father. She had asked him not to let her miss. A week had passed, the kind of week that should have settled everything. But it hadn't. Tomas Delgado had visited once, 2 days after they returned. Brought flowers, wild ones, gathered himself. Said he just wanted to thank her again. His words were clumsy, respectful. His eyes said more than his mouth ever could. She had listened, accepted the flowers, said little. Since then, nothing. Now the sun was sinking low again, casting long shadows across the ground, as Naiche dismounted and led Ash toward the water trough behind her cabin. Dust clung to her boots, to the hem of her skirt, to her skin like memory. A voice cut through the stillness. You always this quiet when you save someone's life. She turned. Tomas stood near the gate hat in his hand, soft. Naiche didn't answer right away. Just untied her saddlebags and slung them over her shoulder. He didn't move. Just waited. Finally, she said, Isabella better every day. She's strong, already walking around the ranch like nothing happened. Her father's healing too. Good. He nodded, glanced at the fading sky. I figured you wouldn't come to the house, so I came here. Hope that's all right. She dropped her gear by the porch and looked at him. Why I needed to see you. Naiche crossed her arms. You've seen me. I mean really see you. He stepped forward, voice low. Out there in that canyon, you were the one who kept your head. I thought I was ready to charge in guns blazing. Would have gotten her killed. Naiche met his eyes. You trusted me? I did. And I still do. A long silence stretched between them, the kind that wasn't uncomfortable but full of words neither had said yet. Finally, Tomas leaned against the fence post. She asked about you. Isabella. Said she felt safe when you showed up. I'm glad, Naiche said. She also asked if I still loved her. That made Naiche lift her head. Do you? He smiled faintly. I told her I don't think I ever did. Not the way I thought I did. I cared. Deeply. Still do. But love. Real love. It's not what I felt back then. It's something I think I'm only beginning to understand. Naiche let out a slow breath. And what is it then? To you respect, he said. Trust. The way you look at someone and see who they really are and want that. Not a version of them you imagine. Just them. He stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough. I see you, Naiche. I see the way you ride, the way you read the earth like it's a story only you can understand. I've never met anyone like you. That's because there's no one else like me, she said, lips tugging in the faintest smile. He returned it. Exactly. She looked away to the porch, the sky anywhere but him. Her chest felt too tight. Something was shifting under her ribs, and she didn't know whether to brace for it or welcome it. You know what people used to say, she murmured, that a woman like me would die alone, rifle in hand, proud, cold. They don't know you. They know enough. I never needed anyone. Didn't want to. And now, she trailed off, shaking her head. Now I keep thinking about that shot, and how scared I was that I'd miss. You didn't. I prayed. His brow furrowed slightly. To God, to my father? She looked up at him. He taught me to shoot, to track, to survive. But he never taught me what to do when someone starts looking at you like you're more than a hired gun. Tomas stepped onto the porch now. Close enough to reach her if he wanted. He didn't. I'm not asking you to change, he said softly. I'm asking if you'll let me stay. Just be around. Talk. Learn who you are past the gun and the grit. Naiche studied him. The wind picked up, brushing her braid across her shoulder. Her hands, always so sure on the trail, now clenched and uncertain. I'm not good at talking, she said. Then I'll do the talking until you want to join in. She snorted, but it wasn't unkind. He stepped back. I'll come by again, if that's all right. She nodded once. It is. Tomas turned, but before he reached the gate, she called after him. Tomas. He looked back. Thank you. For waiting. His smile was quiet. Steady. You're worth waiting for. She stood there long after he left, the air cooling around her, the stars beginning to blink into view. Later inside, she lit a single oil lamp. The flicker cast shadows against the walls. On her shelf sat the rifle she had used that day in the canyon. She ran a finger along the barrel, then turned to the window. She didn't feel alone. Not exactly. A knock came at her door just after sundown the next evening. But it wasn't Tomas. Mateo Valdez stood there tall and wiry, leaning slightly on his cane. His leg still hadn't healed right from the war, but he moved like a man who never let pain slow him. Evenin', he said. Naiche stepped aside, letting him in. You here? He asked. She raised a brow. Settler girl, 9 years old, disappeared near Pine Ridge yesterday. Family camped too close to the mesa. They say she wandered off after a rabbit. Been gone almost a full day now. Naiche's breath caught. How far? About 15 miles northwest. Sheriff sent riders, found nothing. Said if anyone could find her. She was already grabbing her saddlebag. Mateo nodded approvingly. Knew you'd say yes. As they stepped out into the night, Naiche paused, glancing back at her home. The wildflowers Tomas had brought still sat in a jar by the window. I'll be back, she said softly. Then she mounted up and rode into the dark. This one's small, bare feet. She went willingly at first, then ran. The desert saw it all. The wind pushed against the mesquite as Naiche knelt in the dust. One hand pressed lightly to the earth, the other holding a tuft of disturbed grass. She squinted westward toward the shadows cast by towering rock outcrops and scattered junipers and the fading trail barely visible to most eyes. She followed something, she said, voice low. Rabbit, maybe. You can see where she stepped out of her family's camp prints are light. She wasn't scared at first. Mateo Valdez stood behind her, leaning on his cane, watching the ridgeline through narrowed eyes. His grizzled hair was pulled back, and sweat beaded along his temple. Little thing has a head start. Over a day now. Long enough to get lost. Not long enough to vanish, Naiche replied. Not here. They had ridden through the night to reach the Pine Ridge Basin. By dawn, they'd found the settlers' camp, a father wringing his hands, a mother who could barely speak through her panic. The girl's name was Clara, 9 years old, red kerchief, blue dress. Last seen chasing something into the brush before supper. The sheriff's men had come and gone, leaving only a vague path and exhausted parents. But to Nietzsche, the land was louder than any witness. It told her what the eyes could not. She rose, pointing toward a shallow ravine in the distance. She veered off, then ran. Matteo followed her gaze. Why'd she run? Nietzsche didn't answer right away. She crouched again, tracing the deeper indentations. Fear. Tracks changed, deeper heel strikes. Less balance. Look here, she fell. They walked the trail, slow and methodical. Nietzsche moved ahead, reading every broken stem, every shift in the sand. The girl's prints wove between boulders, dipping into a dry wash, then vanishing across exposed rock. Matteo let out a low whistle. She covered some distance. Nietzsche stood silent for a long moment, breathing deep, eyes closed. She stepped forward, scanning the rock's edge. A few paces in, she knelt again. See that Matteo leaned in. Broken moss. She jumped down, rolled maybe. There's a smudge of blood here, just a scrape from the way it looks. Still moving, though, Matteo said. Nietzsche nodded. Tough girl. They followed the trail through narrow canyons, the sun climbing hot overhead. Buzzards circled far off, but not near enough to worry her yet. The prince reappeared after the rock's bare feet again, but slower now. More cautious. She's tiring, Nietzsche murmured. They reached a fork between two canyon arms. Nietzsche hesitated, then dropped to one knee. Split here, she said. Two choices. This side's easier, more shade. But she went left. Rougher climb, less obvious. Why would she do that? Matteo asked. Nietzsche studied the ground, then smiled faintly. Because someone told her not to talk to strangers, someone raised her right. Matteo scratched his beard. Still don't see how you read all that. I don't read it, she said, mounting her horse again. I feel it. They climbed the steeper path. An hour later, they found the scarf, red, fluttering from a sagebrush branch like a surrender flag. Nietzsche dismounted, hand-grazing the fabric. She marked her path, she said. Trying to be found, and we're close. Nietzsche looked up at the sky. The wind shifted. A faint cry reached her ears, thin and dry. Matteo's eyes widened. You heard that? She nodded. North slope. They moved fast now. Ash picked her way carefully over the rocks, sure-footed and steady. The cry came again, closer but weaker. A whimper, not a scream. Then they saw her. Curled under an overhang of rock, knees to chest, eyes wide and wild. Dress torn, face scratched, but alive. Nietzsche slid off her horse and approached slowly. Clara, the girl, flinched, then blinked confused. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Nietzsche crouched, pulling a water flask from her belt. She held it out. It's all right. You're safe. Clara stared, then took it in shaking hands. She drank in quick gulps before coughing. Matteo dismounted behind them. She looked strong, just scared. Nietzsche pulled a strip of cloth from her saddlebag and dipped it in the water, then gently wiped the girl's face. We've got you now. Clara's small fingers clutched her wrist, holding tight. She was hiding, Nietzsche said quietly. From someone. Coyote's Nietzsche shook her head. Men. Or something worse. Matteo went still. They rode slow on the way back, Clara bundled in Nietzsche's spare blanket nestled in front of her on the saddle. The girl barely spoke, but every so often she looked up at Nietzsche like she was seeing something she didn't quite understand. Why'd you come for me? Clara asked in a rasping whisper. Because your mother asked, Nietzsche said. and because you left a trail." The child leaned back against her eyes fluttering shut. They reached the settlers' camp by sunset. Clara's parents rushed out weeping, clutching their daughter as though afraid she might vanish again. The mother dropped to her knees before Nietzsche. "How can we thank you? Don't let her wander near water alone," Nietzsche said. "And teach her to make noise when she runs." The woman sobbed harder, nodding. Matteo pulled her aside as the family huddled together. "You've got a gift." Nietzsche shook her head. "It's not a gift. It's work, learned, honed. You're still the only one who can do it like this." She didn't answer. They rode back toward town in silence, the moon climbing high. At a bend in the trail, Nietzsche slowed her horse. "Tomas came by again," Matteo said casually. She kept her eyes ahead and brought more flowers, asked if I'd seen you. Nietzsche was quiet. "He ain't rushing you, just waiting, like a man who knows something good when he sees it." She looked at him then. "He's not like other men." "No," Matteo agreed. "He's not." They reached the outskirts of Lincoln just past midnight. Nietzsche peeled off toward her cabin while Matteo continued into town. Her house was dark and quiet. The wildflowers Tomas had brought were drying in the jar petals curling at the edges. She replaced the water, then sat on the porch with her rifle laid across her knees. She thought of Clara's eyes in the shadows, of Isabella standing tall even when bruised, of Tomas waiting without pressure, without games, and of herself caught somewhere between the dust and something she hadn't dared to name. She sat there until the wind cooled the sweat from her back and the stars filled the sky again. Then she finally whispered aloud, "I'm not meant to do this alone forever." And for once, the desert stayed quiet, listening, agreeing. "Everyone's got a trail, Nina. The question is, will you follow his or let him follow yours?" The beans had burned. Nietzsche Santiago stood barefoot in her kitchen, the pot hissing gently on the stove, while the scent of char drifted across the room. She didn't move to take it off, not yet. Just stood there staring out the window at the empty yard, the scrubland beyond it bleached gold by the morning sun. Tomas hadn't come yesterday. She'd half expected him, maybe even hoped. After bringing back the settler girl, she thought, well, she wasn't sure what she thought. Just that something between them had shifted. She felt it like wind before a storm, but nothing had arrived. The knock on her door was a surprise only because she hadn't heard the horse. She opened it to find Abuela Rosa standing there wrapped in her rebozo with a sharp look in her dark eyes that meant two things she already knew too much, and she had more to say. "Your horse is still saddled," the old woman said. "You don't even realize you're always ready to run." Nietzsche stepped aside. "Coffee's hot, beans are ruined." Rosa entered slowly, her knees stiff but her spine straight. "I'll take both." They sat in silence at the small table, each with a tin cup, the burnt beans between them. Rosa stirred hers once, then looked up. "You found the child," she said. Nietzsche nodded. "And now you're back here pacing around like a spirit with nowhere to haunt." Nietzsche's jaw tightened. "I don't pace. You sit still then, but your thoughts don't." Outside, a dust devil kicked up near the fence and danced through the weeds before disappearing into the mesquite. "I've seen that boy," Rosa added. Nietzsche didn't ask who. "He waits. Like a man who's learned patience too late and now doesn't know what to do with it." Nietzsche didn't respond. Rosa leaned forward, voice gentler now. "Tell me what you're afraid of." Nietzsche exhaled. "I'm not afraid." Rosa raised an eyebrow. "I just don't know if I have room. Not for what he wants. A man like that with hands that build and eyes that hope. He deserves peace. Not someone who sleeps with her rifle and doesn't believe in luck. You think love is peace? Rosa asked. No. Love is war too, but it's the kind worth fighting. Naiche looked down at her calloused fingers. I've spent so long keeping the world at arm's length. I don't know how to let someone in without losing myself. Rosa reached across the table, laying a wrinkled hand over hers. You don't have to lose yourself. Just stop hiding from yourself. Naiche blinked, throat tight. I don't know how. Rosa smiled softly. Then you learn. The same way you learn to follow a broken hoofprint across 30 miles of canyon. You start small. You stay honest. And you stop assuming the worst. They sat there until the light changed, until the beans cooled and the silence settled. Later, Rosa helped gather herbs in the yard. Her fingers nimble, even now weaving bundles of sage and yarrow. You know, she said, tying the stems with twine, everyone's got a trail, Nina. The question is, will you follow his or let him follow yours? Naiche paused, hands full of rosemary. What if neither of us needs to follow, then walk side by side, Rosa said simply. But don't stand still. That's when hearts rot. The next morning, Naiche saddled Ash and rode into town. Tomas was at the blacksmith's helping reset a shoe on one of the Double R's colts. He looked up when he saw her eyes searching her face like he couldn't quite believe she'd come. Naiche dismounted, but didn't move closer. You said you wanted to talk. I still do. Then finish your work. I'll wait. When the colt was done and the sun hung high over Lincoln's dusty streets, they walked side by side toward the edge of town. No words, just boot heels in rhythm, a comfortable quiet that felt less like silence and more like space being held open. They stopped beneath a cottonwood near the creek. Naiche turned to face him. I've been thinking. That's dangerous, he said, smiling but not mocking. I've been alone for a long time. Not because I had to be, because I thought it was safer. And maybe it was, but I'm tired of being safe. Tomas waited, not pushing. I don't know what this is, she said, but I want to find out. His shoulders dropped like he'd set down a weight. Then let's find out. She looked up at him. I'm not soft. I'm not quiet. I'm not going to start baking pies and pretending I don't know how to skin a man if I have to. He laughed just once. I'd never ask you to be anything but you. They stood like that for a long time. She didn't reach for him. He didn't reach for her. But something between them had closed, and it held. He walked her back to her horse. Before she mounted, she asked, Why'd you wait? He didn't hesitate. Because you're worth it. And because I know what it feels like to be seen for the wrong things. Naiche mounted Ash and looked down at him, the lines of his face drawn in sunlight. I'm not easy. He grinned. I'm not afraid of hard trails. She turned the mare and rode out, not fast, not slow, just steady. And behind her, Tomas watched with a heart not just full, but certain. At the ridge, Naiche paused, looking out over the land. She thought of Clara's small hand in hers, of Rosa's words, of her own father's lessons, whispered over campfires, long gone cold. Then she smiled, just barely. The wind carried it away, but it didn't erase it. At home, she found a note on her porch, folded once tucked under a stone. It was from Mateo. Trouble up north. One of the men you tracked last year, names Calderon, escaped custody. Last seen riding toward White Mesa. Thought you should know. Naiche's fingers tightened around the paper. Her rifle leaned by the door. The trail was calling again. But this time she didn't feel like she'd be riding it alone. You don't forget the face of a man who laughs while another bleeds. The morning broke cold and blue, a thin veil of frost clinging to the tall grass outside Naiche Santiago's cabin. She stood at her workbench, oiling her rifle with slow, precise movements. Each click and slide was quiet, steady part of a ritual that had kept her alive longer than luck ever could. The note from Mateo lay folded on the table corners, worn soft from how many times she'd handled it. Calderon. The name alone brought the taste of iron to her tongue. It wasn't just that he'd escaped, it was that she remembered his face. Remembered what he did to that girl in Valencia Ridge. How he laughed when they found her, how he spat in the sheriff's face when they dragged him away. Some men deserved mercy. He wasn't one of them. Ash waited out front, already saddled. Nietzsche threw on her coat, slipped her knife into her boot, and stepped out into the thin sunlight. Tomas was leaning on the fence post. She stopped short. "Didn't expect you here this early," she said. He nodded toward the saddlebag slung over her shoulder. "Didn't expect you'd be heading out again so soon. Bad men don't wait." He pushed off the fence, walking toward her. "Is it about Calderon?" She paused. "You heard Mateo stopped by the smithy. Said you'd probably go alone." "I always go alone." Tomas shook his head, jaw tightening. "Not this time." Nietzsche raised an eyebrow. "You offering to tag along? I'm not offering," he said quietly. "I'm going." She looked him over. He wasn't dressed for town. His saddle was on the horse, tethered beside Ash. He had that look in his eyes again, the one that didn't beg or push, just stood still and didn't back down. "You know who he is?" she asked. "I know enough. I know what he's done. I know what he'll keep doing if no one stops him." Nietzsche adjusted the strap across her chest, still not sure how she felt about it. "It's not a ride for the weak-hearted." He shrugged. "Then it's good I've got a strong one." They rode north by late morning, cutting across the edge of Dry Brush Canyon and following the narrow game trail toward White Mesa. The desert stretched out around them in golds and browns, the horizon sharp under the winter sun. Hours passed with only the sound of hooves and wind. Finally, Tomas asked, "What did he do to you?" Nietzsche didn't answer right away. Her hands stayed steady on the reins, eyes fixed ahead. "He didn't do anything to me," she said at last, "but he did plenty to others. I tracked him once, 2 summers ago, after he burned a rancher's barn with a family inside." Tomas swallowed hard. "They died 2 kids. Mother survived barely. I found him 3 days later, drunk in a cave. He tried to shoot me in the back, didn't get the chance. You bring him in alive. Thought it mattered back then. Thought if the law saw what he'd done, they'd bury him so deep he'd never crawl out. And now he has." Nietzsche's jaw clenched. Now he has. They stopped to water the horses at a spring just past sunset. The air had turned sharp, and the silence around them was thicker now, as though even the coyotes knew to stay quiet. Nietzsche crouched near the edge of the spring, scooping water with her hands. The reflection that stared back at her wasn't tired. It was alert. Wired. Ready. "I had a dream once," she said suddenly, "about him. After Valencia Ridge." He was laughing. "I was holding the girl's shawl. It kept bleeding through my hands." Tomas sat down beside her. "Dreams like that don't fade easy. They shouldn't." She looked up at him. "People like him, if we forget what they are, we let them become something worse." Tomas nodded. "So we find him. We stop him. Together." They made camp just south of White Mesa under a cluster of wind-warped junipers. The fire was low, crackling in the cold. Nietzsche leaned against her saddle hat, pulled low, staring into the flames. Tomas lay beside her, wrapped in his blanket, but not sleeping. "He doesn't scare you?" he asked. "He doesn't haunt me," she replied. "That's worse." The next morning they picked up a trail, hoof prints, 2 horses headed west along a narrow ridge. Calderon traveled with someone. Prince showed haste, desperation. "He knows we're coming," Nietzsche said. Tomas drew his rifle. "Let's make sure that matters." They followed the trail for 2 hours before the ambush. It came without warning. A shot cracked from the rocks above, striking the dirt inches from Ash's hooves. The mare reared, but Nietzsche held firm, wheeling her behind cover. Another shot rang out. Then laughter. She knew that laugh. Tomas ducked behind a boulder. 2 shooters. One on the ridge. One close. Nietzsche's voice was like ice. The close one's Calderon. She slipped off her horse, moving low, swift. Her heart wasn't racing. It was steady, focused. Tomas provided cover fire as she circled wide, scaling the ridge from the far side. Her boots were silent on the rock. She moved like shadow, like water through cracks. She found him crouched behind a cedar trunk, reloading his pistol. Same face, same smirk, same damn eyes. She raised her rifle, slow, sure. Calderon. He turned, startled, then grinned. "Santiago. Heard you'd come. Funny, I never stopped hunting you. You gonna kill me this time?" "Depends," she said. "You done laughing?" He aimed his pistol at her. "You shoot me, my friend'll kill your man down there. You try anything, you both die." Calderon tilted his head. "You always talk this much before pulling the trigger." Nietzsche didn't answer. She didn't need to. The crack of her shot echoed down the canyon. The second shooter fled before Tomas could reach him. Coward. She didn't bother chasing. Calderon was the route. She stood over his body rifle, still warm. His pistol lay beside him unused. Tomas reached her moments later, breath ragged. "You all right?" Nietzsche nodded. "He won't hurt anyone else." They burned the body that night, a fire high on the mesa, flames flickering against the stars. Tomas stood beside her in silence. Nietzsche watched the blaze. "You don't forget a man like him," she said. "But maybe now I can forget that laugh." Tomas reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. When the dust settles, what's left ain't silence, it's the weight of what you chose to walk away from. The ride back to Lincoln was quiet. Ash's hooves struck rhythm across the dry earth, Tomas trailing close behind. The wind had dropped to a whisper, and with Calderon dead, the air felt hollow, like something long stretched finally snapped. They reached town by dusk. No one came out to greet them. Not even Mateo, though the news would travel fast. Nietzsche dismounted outside her cabin, her spine stiff with the ache of tension that had nowhere left to go. She didn't say much, just tipped her chin to Tomas and stepped inside. She didn't expect him to follow, but she didn't stop him either. Inside, she lit the lamp and set her rifle by the door. Tomas stood quietly behind her, hat in hand. The room smelled of cedar and old books, her father's war blanket still folded at the foot of the cot. Everything exactly where it always was. Nothing felt the same. Nietzsche moved to the stove but didn't light it. Instead, she leaned both hands on the counter and stared at the knot in the wood grain. "He didn't beg," she said finally. "Didn't fight much either. Just stood there like he knew it was always gonna end that way." Tomas leaned against the doorframe. "Some men think dying is their only trick left. Then why does it still feel like I'm carrying the weight of it?" She turned face unreadable. "Why does it never feel like enough?" Tomas stepped closer. "Because it doesn't undo what he did. And because you're not a killer, Nietzsche. Not at your core. You're a protector." She didn't reply, just stared at him, eyes dark and tired. He reached for her hand, not fast, not certain, just offering. She let him take it. "I want to stay," he said, "if you'll let me." She looked down, voice rough. "And if I tell you I don't know how to live with someone, then we figure it out together." She pulled her hand back gently, walked to the window. "Something's coming," she said. "Don't know what yet, but it's not over." He moved beside her. "The land's never still for long." She nodded. "You can stay tonight, but I need quiet. I can do quiet." He didn't leave. The morning came gray and strange, a heavy fog rolling in from the east. Unusual for Lincoln, the town felt suspended in cotton, muffled and waiting. Nietzsche saddled Ash early, kissed Tomas once without words, and rode out toward Mateo's place. He was waiting on the porch, sipping thick coffee from a chipped mug hat pulled low. "Figured you'd come," he said without looking up. "You sent the note. Calderon's done." "I know." Mateo shifted in his chair. "That's not why I wanted to see you." She stepped up onto the porch. Then what Mateo handed her, a folded paper soft from being opened and closed too many times. Nietzsche read it once, twice. A land sale notice. West of Socorro, big spread, government seal at the bottom. But the signature made her breath catch. Rafael Rios, Isabella's father. "Isabella," she asked. "Didn't tell you," Mateo asked. "She's been pushing for expansion. New stage line wants a route through that land. Would cut across tribal grazing ground." Nietzsche's fingers curled around the paper, and he signed off. "For now, but the ink's still drying. I need to see her." Mateo nodded. "Figured you'd say that." The sun hadn't burned off the fog by the time Nietzsche reached the Rios homestead. The land was bigger now, fences stretching wider, new barns, framed out ranch hands moving like a small army. Isabella was near the corral, instructing a worker about some irrigation line. She turned when she saw Nietzsche and walked over with a half smile. "I heard about Calderon," she said. "You all right?" Nietzsche dismounted. "You sold the land." Isabella's face tightened. "It's more complicated than that." Nietzsche handed her the paper. "Not to me." Isabella's voice stayed even. "My father wanted security, money we can't refuse. And that land belongs to people who still depend on it. People you used to call neighbors." "I'm not your enemy," Isabella said. Nietzsche stepped closer. "Then why are you acting like one? I'm trying to protect what's mine." Nietzsche stared at her. "We used to walk those canyons together. Do you remember? You said they felt like they were breathing." "I remember," Isabella said, quieter now. "Then don't choke them just to fill your coffers." Isabella looked away. "You think I haven't struggled? You think being a woman in this world gets easier just because I wear finer boots? Now I have to fight with every man in every room to be heard. That doesn't give you the right to trample what others still need." A long silence passed between them. Then Isabella folded the paper and tucked it in her vest. "I'll delay the sale," she said, "but I can't promise more." Nietzsche nodded once. "Delay's enough, for now." She turned to leave. Isabella called after her. "You've changed." Nietzsche paused at the gate. "So have you. But not all change is good." The ride back was slower. The wind had shifted again, this time colder. At the edge of town, Tomas was waiting on the porch, a fire going beside him, 2 mugs steaming on the rail. He didn't ask what happened. She took the mug, sat beside him. "Trouble?" he asked. Nietzsche sipped, then nodded. "Just dust blowing from the wrong direction." He leaned in. "You don't have to carry all of it." "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes it's the only way I know how to walk. You're not alone now." She looked at him. Really looked. And the ache in her chest softened. Only slightly, but enough. "I thought I'd buried him years ago. But grief has a way of rising through the dirt even after the winds smoothed the grave." The rain came heavy that night. Not the gentle kind that soaked the earth soft and clean, but the kind that pounded roofs and carved gullies in the road. Naiche stood in the doorway of her cabin, arms crossed, watching the dark sky churn above the plains. Ash was stabled, the tack cleaned, her rifle rested by the hearth. Everything in its place, except her mind. Behind her, Tomas added another log to the fire. It popped and hissed, heat chasing the damp from the air. He didn't speak. He rarely did when he knew something was brewing inside her. She finally broke the silence. "I dreamt of my father last night." Tomas looked up. "Good dream," Naiche shook her head. "Not really." She turned back toward the storm. He was standing in the creek bed near our old home. Shirt-soaked boots gone. Just staring at the sky like he'd forgotten what he was waiting for. Tomas set the kettle on the stove, keeping his voice low. "You've been thinking about him more lately. He taught me everything I know about the land. About people. How to read tracks, when to wait, when to strike." Her jaw tightened. "But he never taught me how to grieve." Tomas moved beside her. "You said he died fast." Naiche nodded, fast and loud. "Shot from behind during a land dispute he didn't even start." "I was 17. She stepped out onto the porch, despite the rain letting it soak her shirt trail down her face like it belonged there. The man who shot him, Samuel Cartwright, never stood trial. He vanished before the law caught up. Tomas stood in the doorway, frowning. "That name sounds familiar." "It should. Mateo mentioned him once. Said he was sighted near the Pecos River last spring. Been using a different name, but his face hasn't changed. You think he's back? I know he is." Tomas hesitated. "And what will you do if you find him?" Naiche turned, eyes sharp beneath wet hair. "I'll finish what time didn't." Before dawn, she saddled Ash again. The storm had passed, leaving the sky scrubbed clean and cold. She packed light rifle rations, canteen spare rounds. As she cinched the last strap, Tomas stepped out with a bundle wrapped in oiled cloth. "I fixed that old scope of yours," he said, handing it over. "Figured you might want your best eyes on this one." Naiche took it, studying the workmanship. "Thank you. Don't thank me until you come back." She didn't say goodbye, just nodded and rode out toward the canyon where her father's blood had turned the water red all those years ago. The land hadn't changed much. The cottonwoods were taller, the creek bed deeper, but the air still held that quiet tension. She rode until the sun sat high, then dismounted and walked the rest of the way, letting her boots remember where the trail bent, where her father had fallen. She knelt by the marker she'd carved into the stone years before. Just his initials and the year. No sermon, no sentiment. Her grief had never been loud. It had just settled into her bones. "I thought I'd buried you years ago," she said softly. "But grief has a way of rising through the dirt even after the winds smoothed the grave." A twig snapped behind her. She didn't reach for her rifle. Not yet. "Who's there?" she called out, rising. A figure stepped out from behind a pinyon tree. Older man, broad shoulders, beard peppered with gray. Wore a long duster. Carried a pistol low on his hip. He wasn't trying to hide. "You're Naiche," he said. "Who's asking?" He didn't answer. Just stepped closer, slow and easy. "You've got your father's eyes." Her breath hitched. "You knew him," he nodded. "Rode with him once, before things got bad, before Cartwright." Her fingers tightened around the leather strap across her chest. "You know where he is?" The man didn't flinch. "Name's Amos Herrera. Used to run with Cartwright. I left that life behind, but I heard he's back. Took up with some cattle raiders near the Llano foothills. Calls himself Rogers now. Why are you telling me this? Because I owe your father. And because if you go after him, blind, you'll die." I won't die. You might, Herrera said, stepping closer. But if you do, it'll be for nothing. Cartwright's not just hiding. He's planning something. Naiche stared at him. What don't know yet? But I know he's pulling men together. Quiet-like. Not for rustling, for blood. She took a long breath. Then I'd better move fast. I'll come with you, Herrera said. No, she replied. This one's mine. She rode hard the next 2 days, skirting the canyons and weaving through old mining trails until the air changed sparser, colder. By dusk on the 3rd day, she saw the smoke, a campfire, nestled in a shallow basin between ridgelines. She crept in on foot. Cartwright was there, sitting on a log boots outgun across his lap. 3 others nearby, young, dumb, playing cards like they didn't know who they were sitting next to. She watched for an hour, memorizing everything. Then she backed away, silent. The kill would come tomorrow. Back at her camp, she sat alone beside her own fire, sharpening her knife. A rustle came from the trees, and for a split second, her fingers twitched toward the gun, but it was Tomas. She didn't ask how he found her. She was too tired. I said I'd wait, he said. But not if it meant wondering whether you'd come back at all. She didn't speak, just slid over to make room beside the fire. He sat close, not touching, just near. You sure you're ready for this? He asked. Naiche looked up at the stars. No, but I've been waiting half my life. He nodded. Then I'll be here. When it's done. She didn't thank him, but when she lay down that night, her hand found his beneath the blanket and held. Justice never felt the way I thought it would. It didn't roar, it didn't burn, it just settled, like dust after a long ride. The morning came slow, the sky bruised with violet and ash. Naiche rose before the sun had cleared the ridge boots, laced tight rifle slung across her back. Her face was quiet expression drawn tight with a calm that didn't look peaceful, just ready. Tomas stirred beside the fire. You're going now? Naiche nodded. They'll still be asleep. Or hungover. He stood rubbing his jaw. You want me with you? She looked at him, eyes sharp. No, I need this clean. He didn't argue, just handed her the last of the boiled coffee and said, then finish it. Naiche drank, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and walked into the trees without another word. The basin was still. A few early jays squawked from the pines, and a light wind rustled the dry grass like whispers. She moved like part of it, fluid, quiet, invisible. She had her father's knife strapped to her thigh, the cold metal humming with memory. When she reached the rise, she dropped to her stomach and watched. Cartwright sat by the fire again, same spot. The other 3 still slept in bedrolls. One had his boots off. One had his rifle half buried in dirt. Naiche shook her head. She slid back, circled wide, moving like smoke along the edge of the slope, found her place beneath a juniper that overlooked the whole camp, scoped rifle steady on a flat rock. She waited until Cartwright stood to stretch, cracking his knuckles. Waited until the others started to stir. Then she stepped into view. Her voice rang out sharp and low. Samuel Cartwright. All 4 men froze. Cartwright turned slow, like he'd already known she was near. His face cracked into a grin. Well, I'll be damned. Naiche kept the rifle trained. Drop the gun. He didn't. You got grit, he said, coming all the way out here by yourself. This isn't about grit. He tilted his head. Then what revenge? No, she said. Justice. Cartwright smirked. That what you think this is? It's what I know. She fired once, clean, precise. The rifle flew from his hand and skidded across the dirt. He cursed and clutched his wrist, blood dripping between his fingers. The other 3 reached for weapons. Don't, she warned. They hesitated, looked at Cartwright. Put them down, he growled, breathing heavy. She won't shoot unless she has to. You sure about that? Nietzsche asked. One man dropped his pistol. The other followed suit slower. Nietzsche moved in rifle still steady. When she was 10 feet from Cartwright, she stopped. 17 years, she said. You ran, hid, changed names, but you never stopped hurting people. He looked up at her with narrowed eyes. And killing me fixes that, no, but it stops you. He stood, hand still bleeding, chin high. Then do it. Nietzsche's finger rested against the trigger. The wind held still, and she lowered the rifle. Number. He blinked. What, I'm not giving you what you want. She turned slightly still, watching him. You'll walk back to town, in chains. Everyone will see what you are. He barked a laugh. You think a town like Lincoln gives a damn? No, she said. But I do. Tomas stepped out of the trees, then rifle in hand. We brought a horse. Cartwright's grin faded. By dusk they had him bound and slung over the saddle. The ride back was slow. Tomas led the horse, carrying their prisoner. Nietzsche rode behind, eyes scanning the horizon, not for threats, but for signs that what they'd done mattered. They reached Lincoln just before dark. Mateo met them at the jailhouse, jaw set, eyes wide when he saw the man in chains. I'll be damned, he muttered. You brought him back. Nietzsche nodded once. Alive. Mateo opened the cell, and Cartwright went inside without protest. His hands still bled, but he didn't speak. Tomas lingered behind, watching her. You okay? He asked quietly. Nietzsche stared at the cell door. Justice never felt the way I thought it would. Tomas stepped closer. How's it feel? She thought for a long moment. It didn't roar, it didn't burn, it just settled, like dust after a long ride. He smiled, small and proud. That's enough. They walked home under a sky streaked with orange and fading blue. Nietzsche's body ached, her mind even more so. But she didn't feel hollow. Not this time. That night she didn't dream of blood or fire or the man in the creek. She dreamt of her father sitting on the porch of their old house carving a whistle from cedar. She watched from the steps. In the dream he looked up and smiled. I knew you'd find your way, he said. When she woke it was still dark, but the storm had passed. I thought I was made for the trail, but maybe the trail was only meant to lead me home. The morning sun filtered through the cracked window pane, striping Nietzsche's bare floor with gold. She sat at the edge of the bed, still in her boots, as if she'd only meant to rest for a moment, but hadn't realized how tired she really was. Outside, the town stirred awake. Wagon wheels creaked, chickens scratched, someone cursed at a mule. Lincoln had always been quiet, but it felt different now, less like the edge of the world. More like something worth coming back to. Tomas stood in the doorway, steaming tin cup in hand. His hair was still damp from washing at the pump. You slept in. Nietzsche rubbed her face, muttered, Didn't mean to. Didn't say it was a bad thing. She took the cup he offered, their fingers brushing. He didn't pull away. Cartwright's gone quiet, he said. No visitors, no protests. Mateo says he just sits in that cell and stares at the wall. Good, Nietzsche said. Let him think about it. Tomas sat across from her, pulling a biscuit from his coat pocket. There's something I wanted to ask you. Nietzsche raised an eyebrow. He tore the biscuit in half, offered her the larger piece. You ever think about leaving this life behind, the chasing, the dust, the danger? She held the biscuit, but didn't eat it. Every day. You ever want something steadier? Her gaze drifted toward the window where sunlight danced on the porch rail. I thought I was made for the trail, she said quietly, but maybe the trail was only meant to lead me home. Tomas watched her carefully. You ever think home might be something you choose, not just where you end up? She met his eyes. There was no question in hers, only a kind of stillness that hadn't been there before. I'm not done yet, she said. There's still work. He nodded. I know. But I'm not running anymore. Good, he said. Then I'll stop chasing. Later that afternoon, they rode out to Rosa's place. The elder woman sat in her rocker mending a shawl needle, dancing with practiced rhythm. She didn't look up as they approached. You two look like trouble coming home, she said. Naiche dismounted, chuckling. Feels like that. Rosa gestured to the bench. Sit. Tell me what you've done this time. They told her about Cartwright, about the ride, about the silence that followed. Rosa listened, nodding slowly, as if every part of the story was already written into the wrinkles on her hands. When Naiche finished, Rosa looked at her eyes, deep and dry, like an old well. You've buried a ghost, she said. Now comes the harder part. Naiche frowned. What's harder than justice living after it? Rosa said. Forgiveness too, especially for yourself. Tomas stood, wandered toward the edge of the field, giving them space. Naiche leaned forward. I don't feel guilty for what I did. You shouldn't, Rosa said. But there's a part of you that still wonders if you were ever meant to stay still. That part'll keep whispering. Naiche looked toward Tomas, who had crouched to fix a broken gatepost without being asked. Maybe I let it whisper, she said. But I don't have to let it steer. Rosa smiled. That's how you know you've grown. They stayed until the sun dipped low, golden light spilling across the field. When they left, Rosa pressed a jar of honey into Naiche's hands. For sweet days, she said. Even if they're not often. As they rode back toward town, Tomas spoke softly. You ever think about staying put for good? Naiche was quiet a long time before answering. I think about planting something. Tomatoes, maybe. Or sunflowers. Something with roots. Tomas smiled. You've already got some. You just didn't notice. They passed the old schoolhouse on the edge of Lincoln, now closed its windows, boarded. A small hand-painted sign still hung on the porch. Teach them to grow straight as pines. Naiche slowed her horse. It's been shut down for months. Too few kids, Tomas said. Too little hope. She turned toward him. I could fix that. His brow furrowed. You gonna teach I could. Or protect the ones who do? Make this town feel safe again. You think folks'll trust you for that? They already do, she said simply. They just don't know it yet. They reached her cabin by nightfall. Stars blinked to life overhead, the air soft with summer promise. She lit the lantern, then opened the door wider and let him step inside without waiting for the invitation. He didn't need it. Inside, she poured water into the basin, washed the road from her hands. Tomas unpacked his things quietly, just a few tools, a journal, and the bone-handled knife he'd carved back when he still thought life would be lonelier. I was thinking, he said after a while, about putting in a forge just outside town. Blacksmith works slower out here, but steady. She dried her hands, turned to him. You sure you want to stay? I'm sure I want to stay with you. She crossed the room. Even if I ride out again someday, you'll always ride, he said. But now you'll come back. She nodded once, then stepped closer, letting her forehead rest against his chest, her breath warm against the hollow of his throat. I don't know what kind of life we'll build, she whispered. But I'm ready to build something. His arms came around her without hesitation. That's all I need to hear. The wind outside rustled through the trees. The lantern flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called low and long into the night. But inside it was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that came from fear or waiting, but the kind that came after you've outrun every shadow and turned around to face the light. And this time she didn't flinch. Love didn't come like thunder. It came like morning, slow, sure, and without asking permission. Naiche stood barefoot on the porch toes, cold against the wood, watching the early light spill over the hills. A breeze stirred the thin curtain behind her, and the scent of damp earth and warming pine drifted through the doorway. It was the first morning in weeks she hadn't woken with a weapon in reach. Ash grazed in the small fenced pasture to the east tail, swishing lazily. The cabin's chimney puffed a slow ribbon of smoke, and from inside came the sound of clinking dishes, the soft scrape of bread on a cutting board. Tomas had risen early again. He always did, never said much about why. Naiche liked that about him, that he never made her speak more than she wanted, that he always waited not out of hesitation, but out of patience. She stepped inside. He looked up, smiled. "Coffee's hot?" She nodded, poured a cup, then leaned against the doorframe, watching him finish slicing the bread. "The fence near the south side is sagging again. I'll fix it after breakfast. I can help. You can rest." She smirked. "That's harder than riding half the territory." Tomas finished setting the table. "Then it's about time you learned." They ate quietly. Not because they had nothing to say, but because silence had stopped being something that needed to be filled. It had become a kind of peace. Afterward, Naiche walked to the edge of the porch, eyes trailing over the land. The schoolhouse still needed repairs. Rosa had agreed to teach if someone else handled the hammering. She figured Tomas could manage that. She had a letter to write too. Mateo said the tribal council had been asking about her quietly, curious whether she was coming home for good, whether she wanted to sit among them, speak for the ones who didn't have a voice. She hadn't decided yet. But for once, the not knowing didn't feel like drifting. It felt like choosing. Tomas came up beside her, squinting toward the pasture. "Ash getting slow. She's earned it. You both have." Naiche glanced sideways. "You asking me to retire? I'm asking what you want?" She exhaled through her nose. "That's the hardest thing to answer." Tomas didn't press. Instead, he held out something small, a silver ring carved with a feather motif, simple and quiet. She stared at it. "I made it last week," he said. "No rush. No question even. Just, if you ever want to wear it." Naiche didn't take it right away. She stared down at the grooves in the metal, the way light caught inside the feather's curves. "You think it's time she asked?" He shrugged. "I think time isn't something that tells us what to do. It's just something that passes whether we choose or not." She finally took the ring, turning it between her fingers. It was warm from his hand. "I don't need a ceremony," she said. "Neither do I. I just need to know it's real." "It's been real," he said, "since you let me ride beside you without looking back every 5 minutes." She smiled at that, slipped the ring onto her thumb, not because it was tradition, but because it felt right. Strong. Steady. Hers. Later that afternoon, the townsfolk gathered near the church steps, not for a wedding or a hanging or a trial, but for something quieter. Rosa brought a table of food. Mateo leaned against the post office wall with a rare grin. The children, still shy around Naiche, stayed close to their mothers, but kept sneaking glances. Naiche stood beside Tomas, arms crossed, but relaxed. She hadn't planned a speech. She didn't like speeches, but Rosa nudged her forward. She cleared her throat. "I'm not here to make promises. I've made too many of those already to people who couldn't keep theirs." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. But I can tell you this, she said. I'm staying. I'm not chasing ghosts anymore. I'm not running toward or away. I'm just here. She looked out over the faces, some wary, some softened. And if you need something protection, truth, a tracker to find what others miss, I'll be here for that too. She stepped back. Mateo clapped once. Rosa followed. Others joined. Not loud, not raucous, just enough. Afterward, Nietzsche sat on the church steps, sipping tea, watching the kids chase each other around the dry fountain. Tomas came over, dropped beside her with a grunt. You survived, barely. They like you. They're curious. They're grateful, he said. They know what you did. Nietzsche nodded once. Then I'll make sure it was worth it. He leaned closer. You ever think about raising a kid here? She blinked. That's a jump, he shrugged. Just thinking out loud. Nietzsche looked at the dusty street, the kids playing the slow arc of shadows shifting as the sun dropped lower. I think I'd be scared, she said. Me too. She turned to him. But maybe that's not a bad thing. No, he said. Maybe that's just love. They didn't need more words. The sun dipped past the ridge, casting the town in soft orange light. The world slowed. A breeze stirred the leaves of the cottonwoods. And in that quiet moment, Nietzsche understood something she hadn't before. Not out on the trail, not in the violence, not in the justice. Love didn't come like thunder. It came like morning, slow, sure, and without asking permission. The educational lesson learned from this story is that strength and independence do not have to disappear when we allow others into our lives. Even after years of carrying burdens alone, it is still possible to choose connection, forgiveness, and peace without losing who we are. The story reminds us that justice and closure may quiet old wounds, but it is companionship and shared purpose that truly give life meaning. No matter our age, we can still decide to come home to the people and places that steady us, and in doing so, build a gentler future than the one behind us.